Under the crimson skies of Zareth Prime, war drums shook the ground. Armies clashed in the distance, banners snapping in the wind. The alien Empress's champion, a tall warrior with black wings and red skin, stood at the edge of the arena. She had fought in countless battles, her shield never broken, her pride unshaken. The crowd chanted her name, believing she would crush the strange human who had dared to stand before her. The human, bare-chested and calm, held a strange weapon none of the aliens recognized. It was small, made of steel and chain, with a round spiked head. To her, it looked laughable, like a child's toy. She smirked, tapping her shield twice as a taunt. The air between them was thick with tension, the sound of the crowd fading under the pounding of both their hearts. When the signal horn blew, she advanced with confident strides. Her black wings spread wide, her shield angled forward to block whatever feeble strike he could attempt. The human did not move until she was only a few paces away. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, he swung the weapon in a perfect arc. The spiked head slammed into her shield, and in a single deafening crack, the steel split apart like glass. Gasps tore through the arena. The champion staggered back, looking at the fragments of her once impenetrable defense. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from shock. She had never felt such force. She looked at the human, his eyes locked on hers, calm and cold. In that moment, she realized this was no toy. This was a weapon born from a people she did not understand. The crowd's roar turned into uneasy murmurs. Whispers spread like wildfire, carrying disbelief and awe. No alien weapon had ever done this. No warrior had ever struck her shield in such a way. The human's stance did not change. He waited, letting her decide the next move. She felt her pride push her forward, but a shadow of doubt had begun to creep into her mind. She lunged, her blade flashing toward his chest. He sidestepped with inhuman precision, the chain weapon whirling again in his grip. This time she raised the broken half of her shield to deflect, but he struck low, hitting the arena floor with such force that shards of stone exploded upward. Dust clouded the air, and she coughed, her wings folding tight around her. When the dust cleared, she found herself cornered, his weapon hanging loosely at his side. He had not struck to kill. He had shown her something far worse, the gap between their strengths. In all her years, she had never been spared in such a deliberate, almost insulting way. Her pride burned hotter than her anger. And yet, beneath it all, a flicker of curiosity sparked. The signal to pause the duel echoed across the arena. The Empress's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, demanding the human's name. He gave it with no flourish, no bow. Only a steady gaze that told everyone in the arena he had come for more than just a fight. She did not yet know it, but this encounter would change the fate of her people and the galaxy itself. Asterisk, the humans. Strike still echoed in her mind long after the arena's gates had closed. She sat alone in the dimly lit warrior's chamber, staring at the shattered remains of her shield. Every dent and crack felt like an insult to her years of undefeated victories. Her people expected her to punish the human in next round. Yet something deep inside her was unsettled. She had fought countless foes, but none had wielded such power with such calm precision. Outside, the human walked through the alien corridors without fear. Guards flanked him, but their weapons remained lowered, as if they too sensed something unusual. He observed everything, the architecture, the warriors in training, the strange symbols carved into the walls. He didn't act like a prisoner, nor like a challenger who had narrowly avoided death. He moved like someone who knew exactly why he was here and what he was capable of. Word of the duel had spread beyond the city by nightfall. Traitors, mercenaries, and nobles whispered about the weapon that could break the strongest shield in the Empire. Some claimed it was powered by Forbidden's technology, others that it was enchanted. The truth was simpler, yet far more dangerous. It was human craftsmanship, built for one purpose: to end fights before they began. The champion's advisors urged her to destroy the human before he had a chance to fight again. They feared his presence would inspire unrest among the common soldiers, but she refused, though she couldn't explain why. She told them she would face him again in the arena, but next time she would strip him of that weapon and prove her strength. Her words were confident, yet her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. In the human's holding cell, he was approached by a tall alien officer who spoke with calculated politeness. The officer asked where the weapon came from and how it worked. The human simply smiled and set the weapon on the table between them. The officer reached out, but the human stopped him with a single, quiet sentence, that no one but him should touch it unless they wished to lose their hand. The officer left without another word, but his eyes held a mixture of anger and fear. Training grounds echoed with the sound of steel the next morning. The champion pushed herself harder than she had in years, forcing her muscles to burn with every swing of her blade. She visualized the human's movements, the way he stepped aside, the way he struck. Her pride demanded she crush him, yet her instincts warned her that pure strength would not be enough this time. Meanwhile, the human tested the arena floor in the early hours before the crowds arrived. He tapped it with the spiked head of his weapon, listening to the echoes, judging where the stone was weakest. His expression was unreadable, but his movements were precise and deliberate. Every detail he gathered was another advantage, and he seemed to know that in the coming battle, there would be no second chances. By the time the second duel was announced, the city was overflowing with spectators. Every seat in the arena was taken, and the air was thick with anticipation. The Empress herself sat in the high throne, her gaze sharp and unblinking. Below, the champion stepped forward, wings flaring wide, blade gleaming in the sunlight. Across from her, the human stood as calm as before, his strange weapon resting loosely in his hand. This was no longer just a fight. It was a test of wills, and both knew only one would leave the arena unshaken. The arena gates creaked open, and the sound of the roaring crowd filled the air. The champion stepped onto the sunlit sands, each stride deliberate and heavy with intent. Her black wings cast long shadows behind her, and her grip on the sword was tighter than before. She had sworn to herself that this time she would not be caught off guard. Across the arena, the human entered with the same unshakable calm, his weapon swinging lazily at his side. The Empress raised her hand, and silence fell over the thousands watching. Her gaze moved from the champion to the human, reading them both. She knew this was more than entertainment now. This duel could shift the balance of power within her empire. A single victory in the wrong hands could inspire rebellion or fear, and she would not allow her rule to weaken. The horn sounded, and the fight began. The champion lunged forward, her blade aiming for his chest in a sharp, merciless strike. But the human stepped aside, just enough to let the attack pass without losing his position. He swung the chain weapon in a tight arc, aiming low this time. She managed to block with her reinforced arm guard, but the sheer force of the blow sent a painful shock through her bones. The crowd gasped at the sound of metal meeting metal with such power. Recovering quickly, she twisted her wings to blind his view and drove her knee toward him. He deflected with the weapon's handle, then spun the chain overhead. Dust rose as he advanced, the weapon whistling with each rotation. She backed away, studying his stance, realizing that every movement was calculated to control the fight's pace. He was not fighting with brute strength alone. He was reading her. The human shifted suddenly, bringing the weapon down on the sand in front of her. The ground cracked, spraying grit into her face. She shielded her eyes with one wing, but in that moment, he closed the gap and struck her side. The armor bent under the hit, the air knocked from her lungs. She staggered back, gritting her teeth, refusing to show weakness to the crowd or to him. Around them, the audience erupted into a mix of cheers and shouts. Some called for the human's victory already, others urged the champion to finish him. The Empress's face remained still, but her fingers gripped the arm of her throne tightly. She was seeing something rare, her greatest warrior being pushed to her limits in full view of her people. And the challenger was not faltering. With a roar, the champion launched herself into the air, wings beating hard. She dove toward him. With the speed of a falling star, blade raised high. At the last moment, the human sidestepped, his weapon lashing out and striking the ground where she landed. The impact created a small crater, dust swallowing them both. When it cleared, she was still standing, but her breathing had grown heavier. The human's calm expression had not changed. They circled each other now, each step deliberate, their eyes locked. Neither moved recklessly, knowing the next strike could decide everything. The tension spread through the arena like a living force, holding every spectator still in their seat. The champion's pride demanded victory, but a small, unwelcome thought crept into her mind, that this human might be unlike any warrior she had faced before. And that thought alone was more dangerous than any weapon. The champion could feel the ache in her arms from blocking his relentless strikes. Every swing of his weapon carried a weight that seemed impossible for his size, and each impact tested her balance. She had fought titans with more muscle and creatures with greater speed. Yet this human's precision was unlike anything she knew. He wasted no movement, no breath, and no opportunity. Her mind raced through possible tactics. She could try to shatter his rhythm with brute force, but that had failed in their first duel. She could attempt to wear him down with constant movement. Yet he showed no signs of tiring. Every time she struck, he was already adjusting, already predicting her next step. It was as if he had fought her 100 times before today. The human moved in closer, his chain spinning low and fast. She raised her blade to deflect, but he shifted the angle mid-swing, the spiked head grazing the edge of her armor. The hit was shallow but carried enough force to make her step back. Her wings tightened instinctively, protecting her sides. He was probing her defenses, looking for weaknesses she didn't even know she had. The crowd's voices swelled, some shouting for blood, others captivated by the unfolding display of skill. The Empress leaned forward, her sharp gaze never leaving the fighters. This was no longer about who could land the heaviest blow. It was about control, about bending the other's will until they broke. And in that silent battle of resolve, neither seemed ready to yield. She decided to change her approach. With a burst of speed, she dashed to the side, wings spreading to whip dust into his eyes. In the moment his vision blurred, she struck high, then low, forcing him to retreat for the first time. The crowd roared at the sight, sensing momentum shifting in her favor. But even as he stepped back, his expression remained unreadable. Then came his counterattack. Without warning, he dropped low and swung the chain upward, striking the flat of her blade. The force jarred her entire arm, and her weapon nearly flew from her grasp. She gritted her teeth, digging her heels into the sand, refusing to let go. He pressed forward, each swing forcing her to give ground inch by inch. They clashed near the arena's center, blades and chain colliding with sparks. Sweat glistened on her brow, and her breathing quickened. His movements remained steady, his posture unbroken. She realized with growing frustration that he wasn't fighting at full strength yet. He was holding something back, waiting for the exact moment to unleash it. And that thought made her grip her sword tighter. The Empress finally raised her hand again, signaling a halt. The fighters froze, weapons still poised. The match would resume after a short pause, but the look they exchanged spoke louder than any announcement. This was no mere contest anymore. It had become a test of endurance, pride, and something deeper neither of them had yet admitted. **** The pause in the duel was short, but it gave both warriors a moment to breathe. The champion rolled her shoulders, feeling the strain in muscles that rarely knew fatigue. She could sense the eyes of thousands fixed on her, waiting to see if she could reclaim her pride. Across the arena, the human stood still, resting the weapon on his shoulder as though it weighed nothing. When the horn sounded again, she wasted no time. Her wings snapped open, and she surged forward, crossing the arena in a heartbeat. Her sword cut through the air in a swift arc aimed at his side. The human stepped back just far enough to avoid the strike, then spun the chain weapon in a wide circle. The spiked head whistled through the air before smashing into the sand, sending a spray of grit against her armor. She pressed harder, slashing and feinting, forcing him to move. Each step he took was measured, each dodge precise. She realized he was letting her attack, letting her believe she had the upper hand. That thought drove her to strike faster, her blade flashing in the sun, her wings beating to add speed to her movements. Yet no matter how quickly she moved, his calm never wavered. Then came his opening. As she lunged, he sidestepped and brought the weapon up in a brutal swing. The impact hit her armor just below the ribs, and the force knocked her off her feet. The crowd erupted, some in awe, others in disbelief. She rolled to her feet, clutching her side, the ache deepening with every breath. For the first time in years, she felt the sting of doubt in her chest. Determined to push past it, she used her wings to vault into the air. From above, she dove toward him with all her strength, her blade aimed for his weapon hand. At the last instant, he shifted, turning her downward strike into a miss that left her exposed. His chain lashed out, wrapping briefly around her sword before she yanked it free. The maneuver left them both stepping back, their eyes locked once more. The Empress's voice cut through the noise, commanding the duel to continue without restraint. The order was meant to end the spectacle quickly, but it only seemed to deepen the fighter's resolve. The champion's heart pounded in her ears as she tightened her grip. The human's gaze was steady, as if he had been expecting this moment from the beginning. They met in the center again, their weapons clashing with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The sound of steel and iron echoed off the arena walls, each strike heavier than the last. The crowd had stopped cheering, caught in the tension of the battle. Every eye followed the rise and fall of their weapons. Every breath held for the moment one of them faltered. As the sun dipped lower, its light bathed the arena in gold. Sweat dripped into her eyes, and her breathing came fast, but she refused to slow. The human, though marked by the fight, still moved with that same careful control. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this duel was no longer about victory alone. It was about proving something to each other, something neither of them yet dared to speak. The final bout began under the fading light of the twin suns. The arena was quieter than before, the crowd holding their breath as the two warriors faced each other for what all knew would be the last time. The champion's armor was dented, and her blade bore deep scratches. The human's stance remained steady, his chain weapon hanging loosely, ready to strike at any moment. They moved in unison, neither rushing, neither hesitating. Every step crunched against the sand, every shift of weight telling the other what was coming next. The champion struck first, her blade sweeping in a wide arc. The human deflected with the handle of his weapon, turning the motion into a spin that sent the spiked head toward her side. She blocked, but the impact pushed her back several steps. Her wings flared, catching the last rays of sunlight. With a burst of speed, she darted forward and swung for his legs, forcing him to leap back. He landed smoothly, the chain already spinning above his head. The weapon whistled as it cut the air, then came down in a strike so fast the crowd barely saw it. She managed to dodge, but the wind from the blow tugged at her balance. Knowing she had to shift the momentum, she launched herself upward, beating her wings hard. From above, she dove with her blade aimed at his shoulder. At the last moment, the human twisted, the chain whipping around to meet her. The spiked head struck her gauntlet, the shock making her hand go numb. Her sword slipped slightly in her grip, but she held on with sheer will. The crowd's shouts grew louder, sensing the climax. The human stepped in close, swinging low, high. Then low again, each strike forcing her to defend from a different angle. Her arms burned from the effort, and every block rattled through her bones. Still, she refused to yield, her pride as the Empire's champion demanding she fight until she could no longer stand. Finally, the moment came. As she swung high in desperation, the human sidestepped and brought the chain down in a crushing strike to her shield arm. The force shattered the armor and knocked her weapon from her hand. The crowd gasped, the sound carrying across the arena. She stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring at her empty grip, before meeting his eyes. He did not finish her. Instead, he lowered his weapon and stepped back, giving her space to recover. The gesture struck deeper than any wound. It was not mercy born from pity, but respect for a worthy opponent. She straightened slowly, her chest rising and falling, then gave him a sharp nod. In that nod was an unspoken truth. They both knew she had been defeated, yet neither had truly lost. The Empress rose from her throne, her voice echoing through the arena. She declared the human victorious, but also named him an ally of the Empire. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others stunned into silence. The champion turned away from the sand, her pride tempered by a new understanding. What had begun as a duel had become the forging of an unexpected bond, one that would ripple through the galaxy for years to come. The days following the duel were unlike anything the Empire had seen in decades. Markets buzzed with talk of the human warrior who had bested their undefeated champion. Merchants sold crude replicas of his weapon, while children swung sticks at each other in mock battles. Yet in the palace halls, the mood was far more serious. The Empress had summoned the human and the champion to her private council chamber. The champion entered first, her armor repaired but still showing faint marks from the battle. She walked with her head high, but her eyes betrayed a trace of humility. She had tasted defeat and learned from it. The human followed soon after, carrying his weapon wrapped in dark cloth. Even in the quiet of the chamber, his presence drew the attention of every guard in the room. The Empress studied them both before speaking. She spoke of a brewing war beyond their borders, of enemies who had begun testing the Empire's strength. She explained that the duel had proven something she had suspected for years, that humans possessed a kind of warfare instinct unlike any other race. She intended to use that instinct not against her people, but alongside them. The champion listened, in silence, torn between her pride and her sense of duty. The thought of fighting beside the man who had broken her shield stirred a strange mixture of emotions. She respected his skill, yet part of her still wanted to face him again. But she understood the Empress's decision. This was bigger than either of their personal desires. The human accepted without hesitation. He asked no reward, only that he be given freedom to fight as he saw fit. The Empress agreed, knowing that to chain his tactics to rigid rules would be to waste his greatest advantage. She declared that he and the champion would serve together as leaders of a special unit, one meant to strike where the enemy least expected. In the training grounds, the two began working side by side. Their styles clashed at first, her direct strength against his unpredictable precision, but slowly they adapted. She learned to read his subtle cues while he adjusted to her relentless offense. What had been rivalry in the arena became an unspoken rhythm in battle drills. Their soldiers watched with awe, knowing they were being shaped by two of the finest warriors in the galaxy. Rumors spread quickly among the troops. Some said the champion had sworn to protect the human as fiercely as she protected the Empress. Others claimed she still planned to challenge him again once the war was over. The truth was known only to them, carried in the brief glances and measured words they shared during training. Whatever their personal intentions, Their combined strength was undeniable. When the first call to arms came, the Empire's armies gathered under the twin banners of wing and chain. The champion stood at the front, her wings spread wide, while the human stood beside her, his weapon gleaming in the sunlight. The soldiers behind them knew they were following not just two leaders, but a living reminder of what skill, respect, and unlikely alliances could achieve. Asterisk, the battlefield stretched for miles under a sky streaked with the smoke of burning outposts. Enemy banners fluttered on the horizon, their forces moving in disciplined formation. The champion stood at the front lines, scanning the terrain with a keen eye. Beside her, the human adjusted his grip on the chain weapon, its spiked head catching the glint of the sun. They exchanged a brief nod before stepping forward together. The first wave of enemy soldiers advanced, their armor heavy and shields locked. The champion surged ahead, her wings snapping open as she cut through their front line with swift, crushing blows. The human followed, his strikes precise and devastating. Where her sword forced openings, his weapon exploited them, breaking shields and scattering the enemy ranks. The rhythm they had built in training now flowed effortlessly in the chaos of war. Explosions rumbled in the distance as siege weapons fired from both sides. Dust and smoke blurred the air, but the two warriors pressed on. The human's movements seemed almost impossible to predict, his chain weapon striking from angles the enemy could not defend. The champion's presence was like a storm, each strike of her blade sending foes reeling. Together, they carved a path straight toward the enemy's command unit. The enemy commander, a towering alien clad in crimson armor, stepped forward to block their advance. His voice roared above the din, challenging the human directly. The champion moved to intercept, but the human stopped her with a slight gesture. Without hesitation, he stepped forward alone, the chain spinning at his side. The duel that followed was fast and brutal, every strike ringing like thunder across the battlefield. The commander's heavy blows dented the ground, but the human's speed and timing outmatched raw strength. With a sudden decisive swing, he shattered the commander's weapon and sent him sprawling to the dirt. The sight broke the enemy's morale, their ranks faltering under the weight of shock and fear. The champion seized the moment, rallying their soldiers to push forward and finish the fight. By the time the sun began to set, the enemy was in full retreat. The field was littered with abandoned weapons and the banners of the defeated. The champion stood tall, her armor scarred but her resolve unshaken. The human stood beside her, his chain weapon resting loosely in his hand. The soldiers around them raised their voices in victory, their cheers echoing far into the distance. When they returned to the capital, the Empress welcomed them with honors unmatched in living memory. She declared the battle a turning point in the Empire's history, naming both the human and the champion as protectors of the realm. The people celebrated for days, their streets filled with music, light, and the retelling of the fight that had saved them all. The story of wing and chain became legend, and so the warrior who had once called his weapon a toy now carried it as a symbol of unity. The champion who had once stood against him now fought at his side, bound not by orders, but by mutual respect and trust. Together, they had changed the course of a war and the fate of two worlds. Their names would be remembered for as long as the Empire endured.